maybe we should just get started.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, cool. We've got a ton of questions. Hopefully some more people hop on the call. Yeah. Anywho, start with an easy one. Okay. I'd like to know your take on this question anyway, Zoe. Yeah, people are already starting to think about winter in our neck of the woods, Colorado and the western states out here. And an athlete, they emailed in with a question about winter training. The author says, "It snowed last night and it got me excited for winter. How much skiing can a runner do in winter? I just love to ski and I want to go every weekend. I've worked really hard to make improvements over the last 6 months running wise, and I don't want to lose those gains. What's your advice?"
I would say without running 5 days a week, it's going to be really hard to not lose gains. I would say you can maybe maintain with 4 days a week of running, but it's going to be hard, and you're certainly not going to progress with only 4 days a week of running. And that's not to like always be the person trying to suck the fun out of winter, but the thing is that running is so neuromuscular that if you're not constantly honing those pathways, you're going to lose ground and you're going to lose efficiency. I would say you could probably ski most weekends, but it would be really helpful if you were able to get a few, less than an hour in either before you hit the slopes or, that's probably going to be more helpful than trying to run after a day of skiing, because running on really tired legs is not that helpful. I know it's tough, like, especially if you live in the Front Range and then you're commuting into the mountains, you have to already wake up super duper early, but that's just kind of like what it is. If you're not able to consistently run, you're going to lose ground.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. It's a consideration that I have every winter, as an athlete who, comes from a ski background. Again, you really want to be aiming for 4 to 5 runs a week. That's really the crux of good, consistent training. There's no way around that. I think, working in some flexibility can be really helpful. And then some of those ski run doubles actually, I think are beneficial. And I do think that for athletes who want to ski, particularly like if it's an uphill skiing element. So I think the author of this question has an interest in skimo, which is an endurance sport. It can really help to build your aerobic system. However, it's a very unique sport. You're developing neural pathways to be more efficient in skimo the same way as you're doing in running. And although the efficiency will not kind of carry through from one discipline to another, the fitness does. So sometimes with athletes like that, I do like to have them do a morning ski and then an afternoon run double. And that can just be very short, 30 to 35 minutes. Just to keep maintaining kind of that running consistency. If you are in your first year of training, like really running specific training, I would strongly recommend buckling down and getting that full year under your belt of consistent training. This is something that I did with my coach and really made a lot of ski related sacrifices in 2018. And that was my first season working with the coach, and started in my first season where I switched to year round running. If you do that, you're going to be in a completely different place as a runner come spring than you would be otherwise. And I strongly recommend it. Once you've kind of gotten that year of consistent kind of neuromuscular adaptation under your belt, you've really built some of those neural pathways, done a lot of hills, done a lot of strides. I think that second winter season, you can work in some more flexibility there, and you can probably get away with 4 days a week of running. And so, with athletes, I guess this is an athlete of mine who asked this question, but, sometimes like Friday could, as a cross training day, that could be a ski day. And then Sunday, the day following your long run, could be an optional ski day as well. So it's a good way. You're still getting, 4-ish runs to 5 runs a week, but 2 of those runs can be, could be optional ski days depending on your schedule and things like that. It really depends on that. Like for me as a coach, like my advice on this kind of depends on where the athlete is in the process.
Yeah. And if you're feeling way more hyped on the skiing over the winter, for the love of God, do not sign up for a spring ultra. Like you'd be surprised how many people are like, oh, I'm going to ski so hard this winter, but I also want to be ready for behind the rocks.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
It's really tough to do that, right? Like, it just brings up a lot for me. Again, I came to trail running. I started trail running because it helped me improve my abilities in the mountains and my fitness and my primary athletic pursuit during those times, like 2012, 2013, when I really got into trail running. My primary pursuit was skiing, ski mountaineering. And I don't know if everybody is familiar with my background in that, but making that transition to running full time really helped to improve my running. And that is tough to do at first for a lot of people who love to ski. But I think that if you're dedicated, you can work that double in. I mean, 5 days a week of running is really, really important.
4 is the minimum necessary to maintain.
Yeah, I would say so. And it depends too, what the specific kind of training that you're doing, 4 days with 2 days of hills and strides and 1 workout and getting a long run in there. That's a pretty decent training week if the other 2 days are pretty specific schema uphill volume. Now, if those days are riding the lifts and getting a lot of lift serve access in, there's no fitness element really to that. There's a little bit of strength on the downhill skiing and things like that. Great for the quads and the glutes and the adductors and whatnot, but it's not running specific. So that really, I like to have my athletes who do like a long day of skiing. If they can try to sneak in, 30-35 minutes of just light jogging after, that can really help. And I used to really like, you're out, your skis are heavy. You're kind of out with all that gear all day. And I used to love the contrast of like then going for a run a few hours later. Like my legs used to feel so light just because I didn't have all that gear on.
I always ran before the ski. That was like my deal with myself.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely different ways to approach it, and it depends on like what the time available that you have. A lot of people.
But also, skiing is not a rest day. Skiing is not resting.
Yeah,
it is skiing. Resting is resting.
Fully agree with that. Yep. Cool. Well, I hope that answered the question.
So yes, you can ski with 900 caveats.
Yeah, totally. And you should get some skiing in. Things that bring you joy and make you happy are going to make the training a lot more sustainable. But you have to be very honest with yourself about what your goals are, when those goals are taking place. And you have to be willing to sacrifice. If you want to ski every single weekend in the winter, great. I'm going to support you with the caveat that you understand that you might be leaving some potential on the table. The winter is a really good time to build speed. It's a great time to build those neural pathways so you're feeling stronger and more efficient. When spring and then mountain running season comes along, or adventure season, whatever you like, however you want to call it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we got heavy hitter questions this week. I felt when I was writing these down and compiling this list. Maybe we'll get into a heavy hitter that we glossed over last week because it was such a tough question. All right. I might be, Sarah, I might be calling on you on this one for some expertise. So just a heads up. Okay. This is a really good question from one of my athletes. I've been struggling to connect with my why this summer. It seems like every day I'm out there grinding and it's smoky, or I'm on the treadmill or doing another Peloton ride, and I'm just not connecting with my community and I'm feeling down. Have you seen this in your own athletic journey or in other athletes? Is there a way back from this? Is it normal? Zoe, would you like to start us off, or should I jump in?
I think sometimes the why is overrated.
Explain that.
If you're fully reliant on having a why that's dialed in all the time as your primary source of motivation, then you're just kind of setting yourself up to fail. I think being able to get yourself out the door independent of how inspired or connected you feel is really, really critical to success. I do not always feel inspired by my job or by being a good partner. Nonetheless, you get up and you do it. You have to kind of fake it till you make it. And that's not bad. That's just like what being a person is. And then it starts to become a habit, and then you can occasionally draw on the why. But if you're waiting on having some like deep spiritual connection to running or your community to get you out the door every day, you're kind of setting yourself, you're asking a lot of the universe and you're asking a lot of yourself. But you definitely don't want to feel that way every single day. I think it could be worth investigating, potentially with a therapist, not your why in the sense of like running, but like kind of just like why you feel compelled to do something that maybe you don't love doing. And like, if it feels like that every day, then maybe then you really need to change tactics and potentially seek out some mental health assistance, because if there's something that you typically do love and it starts to become uninteresting or feel like a source of pressure rather than joy, I think that's worth investigating with someone that has more mental health expertise than myself. But it's very normal for everyone to have ups and downs in their athletic journey. It's like, if that lasts for a very long time, that I would start to change things rather than sitting around wishing your why is gonna, jump out of the bushes and like inspire you, because that's just not gonna happen.
I think, and I don't know if this challenges kind of what you're saying, Zoe, but I feel like there's a strong difference in like between you and me. Like, I tend to have a lot more ups and downs when it comes to like feeling good about the athletic journey. You tend to be like, boom, I'm getting out there. Like, you don't, yeah, it's different. Like, you tend to not have like ups and downs in your training journey, and you just go. And I tend to like feel like, yes, it's normal. Yes, you can come back from like not feeling super connected. I tend to relate to this athlete, but I think what you said was super interesting about making the running a habit, so you're not reliant on the why every time. And I think that's fundamental for anything that you do, because in order to be gritty, to be able to persevere, to have resilience, if those things that you're trying to work on, if they're already habit, that's like, you have the neural pathways there. I go downstairs, I put my shoes on, I go out the door, I run for 60 to 90 minutes, like regardless of how I feel. And sometimes the running makes me feel better, which is awesome. Other times, it feels a little grindy out there. And then that makes me question, okay, well, am I being present? What am I thinking about? Am I kind of thinking about things that happened yesterday? Am I worried about like my work and my coaching that's going to happen after this run? Like, I'm getting out of that present moment. And so sometimes that elicits a little bit of internal dialogue and deep thinking on my part. And I think that, if you grind too much too long, and just relating this back to the question here, but if you're grinding too much too long and you're not finding joy, and joy doesn't have to come from your why, joy can come simply from grinding. Joy could come simply from running, and the act of trying to do a little bit every day to get better. But if you're not feeling the joy factor, then that can be an issue over time.
I would also say one of the reasons I think I find so much joy in running is that I don't put any pressure on it. Like, running is just running for me. It's not like the only way I connect with my community or the only way I connect with myself or my why. Like, running is just running. So it's always pretty delightful when there's just no expectations on it. And I think that if you're expecting to get out there and have running be like a spiritual, transformational, connect with your why experience, then I think you're just kind of setting yourself up for failure. But if you just go out there and you're grateful for any of the good stuff that does happen, then you're able to have a much more realistic relationship with it.
Ooh, that's zero mindset. Nice job. Sarah, what do you think about this topic as a mental health expert?
So the first thing I'd say is like really good to be checking in with your coach about these things and logging about this, and really paying attention to any patterns that are coming up in like your 4-point check-in. So if you're having like low mental emotional multiple days in a row, and you're low motivation for working out and you're not finding joy, then I'd probably talk to your coach about adding a rest day or decreasing volume or minimizing stress in some way, because that we want to start there, right? See if we can decrease the stress a little bit. And then, just see how you're responding to that and paying attention to any of those things and talking to your coach about it. I think there's something to be said about, every day is not going to be like wonderful and beautiful and glamorous. And like, there will be days where like, you might not want to get out the door, and persevering through that. But if it always, like Zoe was saying, like it always feels like you're persevering and always ever finding the joy, then it's time to take a look at things again. And so in terms of finding your why, that can always be changing. So if you had a why at some point, and it's not like you're not able to pull from that, it's not sparking anything in you anymore, then maybe that's not your thing anymore. Like I remember when I was a new mom, for me, a lot of my why was getting out of the house and away from my kids. But now my kids are in school all day and our time together is really valuable. And so I'm not like eager to get out of the house. So my why has changed over time. So going and looking at when I do run, when do I have the joy and when do I feel depleted? So looking at those two things, like, and just sort of looking at which runs lift you up and which ones don't, and seeing if you can find kind of a source of your why there.
That's awesome. And I really,
such good advice.
Yeah, that was really well spoken. And I think that I can certainly relate to having a flexible why, or having multiple whys, or having a why that changes, so you can draw on different kind of motivations that maybe are within yourself or out or are external as well. And having kind of that diverse, I guess, tool set there can be really helpful, because the why can't always be external. If your why is only community, that's really hard, because
you're gonna have to do a lot of solo days.
Like at least where I live, like I, maybe once a week get to run with somebody. And although like I love community, that's why we started Microcosm. That's why we're on this call right now. The reality for me, living in a really rural place, is that like our running community is pretty small, and like doesn't always make sense for me to go to the group run on Thursday night, with my schedule. Or it doesn't always make sense for me to like run with a running partner. So some of that motivation has to come from other places. And if you only have one motivator, that's really limiting. So exploring other kind of motivations can be really important. I think for everybody in Microcosm, one motivation, one part of your why has to be improving a little bit every day. Just falling in love with the process of improving. That doesn't have to be the only thing you lean on, but that's the reason why you go out and run consistently in the first place. I think it should be. So think about that. Kristen, I'm curious what your thoughts are. If you've worked with any athletes who have been struggling with this, I'm sure that you have.
Oh, sorry. I was on mute. Yeah, definitely. And I think this happens at some point for every athlete, especially if you've been training for a long time. There's ebbs and flows to everything. I think reconnecting with your why is really important, but I also think that it's important to get out the door for just 10 minutes every day. If you can get out the door for 10 minutes, chances are you'll kind of like run the funk out, is kind of how I like to explain it. And you'll go further than just the 10 minutes. So I think that a lot of times getting out the door is the hardest part. But if you can, reward yourself for getting out the door, or a lot of times, like if you can put landmarks into your run where it's like, if I can get out the door for 10 minutes, if I can get to the mailbox, if I can get to the end of the street, and then reevaluate how you're feeling, is typically works pretty well.
Yeah, and be patient. What I also think that comes from that is just be patient with yourself. If you get out the door, give yourself that 10-minute grace period and just see how it feels. And then, maybe try, and if that felt okay, try another 10 minutes. And every mile, every 10 minutes, every mile, is an opportunity to kind of like lift yourself up a little bit and just kind of change the way that you're feeling. And I think that also directly goes back to what Zoe says about, what are your expectations going into these runs? Do you expect to feel awesome every time? Do you expect to be deeply connected with your why every time? Do you expect to feel tangible improvements in your running every single day?
If you want any of that, running is going to really knock you on your ass.
Yeah, it can. And you can feel those things too.
You will feel them at points, but you will definitely not feel it every day.
Yeah, certainly not. And certainly not the better you get, because it takes longer to improve the better you are as an athlete. So yeah, I hope that kind of helped. And just know, like, if you're not connecting with your why out there, I feel it is very normal. I think all the other coaches have reiterated that they do as well feel that is very normal, that we've seen that in our own athletic journeys from time to time as well. And I definitely relate to this question. And I think, at least for me, one of the biggest things, and kind of Sarah mentioned it, a couple things to kind of summarize this is like, what are your expectations? How long have you been feeling this way? If there's a pattern, talk to your coach so we can introduce some kind of intervention to help you break out of that pattern. And also, remain flexible with your why, be able to adapt and change your why over time.
And then I feel like, to sum up, there's the quote from Brad Stulberg, like, don't wait to feel good to get going to feel good.
Right. Totally. Yeah. Mood often follows action.
Mood follows action.
Yeah. There are a couple. Oh, go ahead, Sarah, please.
So like, also, if you know that there are certain types of activities that do make you feel good, or certain, like you were saying, TJ, like you don't always have that access to that group run, but like if you're feeling burnt out and feeling unmotivated and you love that, then like seeking that out, like getting out to the mountains, or like going to the place that does bring you joy, and not just waiting for it to show up. You kind of have to like work a little bit sometimes to put those things into your life. So
yeah, it's so true. And I call that manufacturing the joy, or like manufacturing that energy, or that kind of, that feeling that you want to have. And sometimes you have to fake that. Like a lot of times I go out on runs and I just like try to smile during the first mile if I'm feeling a little bit off, because I know, one, if I smile, it's going to relax my face, and then that relaxes the rest of my body. And that relaxed feeling really helps loosen up my stride, and like a lot of great things kind of follow after that. Like race week time tends to always be like a stressful time for me. So I try to like really manufacture, like, and even just tell myself like, this is awesome. This feels so joyous. Like, even if that's not necessarily true, I tell myself those things. I kind of work in those affirmations, because eventually, like over a few days, it actually changes like my mindset. And I do feel like more relaxed before that race, or I'll kind of like try to force my way a little bit out of like that training funk. And I know that there are other, great strategies to doing that. That's just one that kind of comes to mind for me. There are some like great comments here. One is about, yes, we kind of are still in the middle of a pandemic. I would say that we are, absolutely. And so, there is still some like residual funk happening for everybody. The last year obviously has been, really, really challenging.
It's been like 2 years. Right?
Right? I mean, I'm losing track of time. What were we even doing this time last year? The Grand Traverse, we did that. It was
Mhm.
like right before that. And it was, yeah, I mean, very
Well, I
much
mean,
still
that
the
was cool
pandemic.
because it was just like, oh wow, we're gonna get to do a race this year.
Yeah.
So that was really special.
Yeah, so give yourselves some grace, if you're not like, don't be judgmental or self-critical if you're not like connecting with each run. Try to just take that information, recognize it, and then maybe do something about it. And doing something about it could be contacting a mental health expert in your area, or just letting your coach know that you haven't been feeling your best. There's also another comment here about the social media narrative, that everybody has these like amazing supportive groups of friends and they're running with them all the time. Yeah, that's, at least in my experience, that's not super accurate. Yeah, I mean, running, as Denzel mentions here, running is really a solo pursuit a lot of the time. And therefore it can feel a bit lonely sometimes, especially when you're kind of in the throes of a tough training block. You're really trying to grind. You've been training all year, and now you've still got 12 weeks before your 100 or whatever. That can be really tough. I totally relate to that. But it's good to remember. I think it is a good reminder, like, hey, we sign up for these things. Like, no one else can run this for us. We have to kind of sink in, and sometimes like I try to find appreciation in like the things that I can do on my own. And running is one of those things in many ways. Yeah, I don't know if for Sarah or Kristen or you, Zoe, that kind of comment from Denzel brings up anything.
Like I used to, when I lived in Arkansas, I trained with Drew every day, Christmas morning, New Year's Day morning, like every day of the year. And then I moved to Colorado and kind of like didn't really have a group, and it was challenging for a bit, but then I was able to kind of train more specifically for myself. So it probably ultimately ended up benefiting my training, but without Drew, I might not have fallen in love with running. So it's kind of like, different seasons have different stuff going on. And if you can learn to appreciate what is unique and different about each season and be grateful for it, rather than being like, oh, I hate running alone, or like, I'm being dragged down by these people or whatever, then, not to say that Drew like ever has, just an example.
Yeah.
Like obviously training with like a 110 half marathoner is great for one's self-esteem, but it's, just be grateful for whatever is going on, and it will, like, it sounds cheesy, but really intentionally cultivating a gratitude practice will make all of these things easier.
Love that. Yeah, absolutely. Great tip, Zoe. Cool. Well, maybe we'll move on to another question. Thanks everybody for contributing to that. Yeah, and really appreciate the comments here in the chat box. Feel free to use that, guys. Let's see. Maybe we'll steer away from the next heavy hitter. We'll take a little bit of a break. This is a long run and breathing question. I did my longest run on Saturday, and despite keeping an easy pace, I found myself getting out of breath. What are the likely causes of that? And when it happens, should I take a walking break or just try to do a slow shuffle? Awesome question.
I would kind of try to reverse engineer that run for next time and just start slower. I think so many athletes start their long runs way too fast, when the ideal long run should end ideally faster than you started. And if that means starting really, really comically slow, then like, that's great.
I would say yes to that, Zoe, with the caveat that for a lot of athletes we coach, their long run in a build sometimes is their first like time at that distance. So I would say that it's very normal to feel like those miles in a distance that you've never gone before are challenging. And that might be soreness of legs. That might be overall tiredness. That could be what you described, having trouble breathing. And to me, that means you've really exerted yourself. And that run has been very challenging. And my advice would be, yeah, it's okay to like really slow down. really check yourself. Make sure you're fueling well. Were you getting in 100 calories an hour? Maybe you haven't eaten in the last hour. Or are you getting 300 calories an hour, which is going to really help to sustain that effort. So check those things, check the things that you can control and try to respond to what you're feeling. If it's like shortness of breath or like really like elevated heart rate and stuff, yeah, that's definitely a sign that you've exerted yourself. So it might be appropriate to like walk for, a quarter mile or for a few minutes and then, try to get your core temperature down and then, start to run again. Make sure you get some more food in and then start to run again. But that's definitely something that's really important. And again, like, envision and ask yourself sometimes when you start these long runs, is it realistic that in 20 miles, I'm going to be running like this? That's something that I ask myself all the time, especially in my races, like when I start out. And I've really started to come to this important conclusion about long runs is that every long run really should be a progression. That first hour should be really, really relaxed. I think a step or two, maybe back from easy, depending on how you're feeling and how your training week has gone. And then you kind of close every mile after that a little bit quicker, a little bit quicker. So you're ending feeling good as you possibly can. Long runs are hard and you're not going to feel your best, but we want to do as much as we can to make those last few miles feel as good as possible rather than a slog, rather than go to the well effort, because that's not sustainable physically and mentally over time. Yeah. I'm curious to hear from Sarah or from Kristen. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say, paying attention as that heart rate is increasing and as you're beginning to get out of breath is try to manage it before you get to that place where you feel like you have to walk. Maybe pay attention, like hills can just be total crushers and just get that heart rate really up there. So don't feel like you have to force the hills, take those nice and slow, walk the hills if that's hard for you. Just, trying to pay attention to where it's happening in the run. And I would just encourage like really that self-reflection and just sort of paying attention, checking in with yourself every quarter mile, half a mile. Okay, where am I at now? How am I feeling? Am I holding my shoulders up tight? Am I loose? Can I take a big deep breath? Building in those check-ins during the course of your run so that it doesn't get away from you.
Oh yeah, such great tips there, Sarah. Yeah, awesome. Oh man, something came to mind for me there, but I completely forgot about. Especially in that first hour, we're feeling fresh. We're coming off of for a lot of people, a rest day, and there's that tendency to want to charge the hills early. Think about whether you'll be able to charge those hills later if you do that. That first 40 minutes, hour, like if you can't see the top of the hill, you could power hike. There's nothing wrong with that. That's something that I've been doing a lot in my own training this summer, is like really running, those first few climbs in a long run, super, super chill. And even power hiking whenever I need to, especially if I can't see the top of a climb and it's steep. I'm like, I'm going to power hike this. So later in the run, I can start to push a little bit and run these, or I'll be power hiking really strong rather than power hiking from a depleted place later on. And I found that has started to like raise the quality of my long runs. I finish feeling better rather than like I've just like run a race or something, and that's not what we're going for. Yeah, awesome. Cool. Well, maybe we'll move on to another question. Who's ready for a heavy hitter? Oh man. Okay. Perhaps you could discuss post-race blues or end of the season blues. Many of us sign up for races 9 to 12 months in advance and training for those big events. Sorry, I'm kind of blowing the reading of this. Perhaps you could all discuss post-race blues or end of season blues. Many of us sign up for races 9 to 12 months in advance, and training for those big events give our days and weeks structure. Also, how to fill the time during long recovery periods before returning to running. Even with other interests, it's hard to feel a little lost without regular exercise. It's hard not to feel a little lost without regular exercise. Sorry, I hope you all got the gist of that question. That was a little tough to read. Yeah, so we're talking about post-race blues. We're talking about end of the season blues, what to do during long periods off. And how to like maybe inject a little energy into kind of those like long rest periods after a race. Yeah, maybe I have a lot of advice on this one.
Go for it. Yeah, take it away.
I don't like to start.
But I think you might have to.
Okay. Yeah, I actually do. I experience post-race blues the majority of the time that I'm racing. Yeah. In fact, I think this has we had TMR recently. That was about 3.5 weeks ago. And this is like the first time that I haven't experienced post-race blues after an event. And I think the biggest reason for that was that I really worked on managing my expectations before that race. And I really worked on managing my expectations after the race. And when you have I wouldn't call them low expectations, but when you have like an openness to feeling whatever you feel and not judging those feelings, I feel like I don't associate, like I'm feeling a little off today. I just raced, I don't have any goals. I feel a little off. I feel a little down. I'm not like ascribing like some kind of like negative or positive feeling to that. So there's, it's easier to kind of be like, okay, I just kind of feel the way that I feel. And that's okay. And I think that like lowering the expectations or just trying to be open, not having that expectation is something that's been really, really helpful for me. Because in the past, I've definitely been there where like after a race, it's like this big event. I trained for 3 years for TMR essentially. And that was like the culmination of a lot of things for me in my athletic kind of career. And like that could totally set me up for like a huge plummet of energy, especially because I gave so much of myself to that race. And really for me, a lot of meditation after a big event, just being able to kind of be still and to maybe think deeply, but not self-critically or not judgmentally. And I think also another thing is I frame every race as a training day at this point, which really helps. This is just another training day, the impetus for something else, even if I don't know what that thing is yet. And when I look at my races and say, this is just a training day, it really helps to kind of like lower the pressure that I might put on myself, to perform as a sponsored athlete and whatnot, things that I have succumbed to before, and let kind of dictate how I feel, especially when it comes to like whether or not the outcome is what I'm pushing for or not. I don't know if that was well said, but I think maybe some other things come up to mind.
Yeah, I mean, there are like biological reasons for post-race blues as well. I know for myself, like I get very focused during events, and maintaining a high level of focus for like 9 to 12 hours is taxing. And I just basically am prepared to feel a huge dip in not feeling so great. It kind of just feels like your brain has like squeezed all the serotonin out.
Yeah.
I think probably Sarah will have has some more meaningful to add to this as the expert.
So like the question is really interesting because there is definitely like a difference between post-race blues and post-season blues, because the post-race blues is that hormonal, like there's a physiological thing happening. I think about it a lot like the postpartum 2-week postpartum baby period. And it's really similar. There's like a 2-week period following a race where there's huge fluctuations in your hormones, especially the bigger the output of the race. So expecting changes in mood and things like that make a lot of sense. But so what I try to do is prepare for that in advance. So making sure I have lots of fatty foods, that I'm putting like as much rest into my day as possible. Like TJ was saying, like meditation and breath work. Being prepared and considering the recovery is part of the race. Like the race does not end after you cross the finish line, but like actually you have to take care of yourself and make sure, like I try to take melatonin so that I can sleep that night, because I know that my cortisol levels are going to be so high that I'm not going to be able to sleep if I don't make an environment conducive to sleep. Like it's not going to happen. My body's going to resist it. So like, forcing the sleep and all of that kind of stuff. But then the second part of the question is this season, so it's the end of the season. And this stuff's not so much like hormones. This is just like, that change in routine, and that free time, and that like loss of a sense of purpose. And so those things are a little bit different. Although I would think that even if you're not training for anything, you're still running 5 days a week. So hopefully you're able to keep that routine and that structure as much as possible. And I'm sort of there with whoever wrote this question right now. Like, I don't have anything that I'm training for. And so it does feel a little bit some weeks like, well, I don't know, like what, like, do I have to do this run in this way? And a lot of times, no, I talk to Zoe and it's like, no, this is a great time to be flexible in your training and do the things that you love, because you don't have like a race that you're training for.
Yeah.
So like, thinking about it that way, like, well, getting back to the why, like, are there things that you can still do that are running related that maybe aren't training related, but like bring you joy? So trying to focus on those things a little bit.
Yeah,
like,
the habits, like they don't have to go away just because you're, in your 10 to 14 day rest period after your 100. You can still set aside time for foam rolling. You can still engage in parts of the process that kind of allow you to like circle back and say like, I am still running. I am still a runner. I am still working towards future goals, even if I don't know what they are yet. And something that I like to have my athletes do, depending on how they're feeling during that off season, like normally for me, I get to my little mini off season after a big race and I stop thinking about running altogether. Like I need that break. My whole life revolves around running all day long. So when I get that chance to like right now I'm injured and I haven't run all week, and it's been like almost one of the best weeks for me because it's giving me a chance to completely like disengage from running aside from the coaching. And I love that. And so like, I frame that as training sometimes too, because rest is training. And so like I'll go downstairs and get on the foam roller for 10 minutes and do some stretches, or I'll go put my legs up the wall and I'll engage in these small things that like remind me like, you're still an athlete, you're still training, you still have things on the horizon. Even if that looks a little bit different right now, like that's okay. And I think even for athletes who struggle on the rest day, which is like a small version of struggling during off season or struggling when you don't have a specific goal on the horizon, is still like, if you want to engage in your regular routine, like at 10 in the morning, I go and get my running shoes on. Awesome. Go put your running shoes on and then just go foam roll or go do your stretching. Go do a little walk, get yourself a coffee. Like whatever that is that keeps you kind of in that habitual, this is what I do during this time of day, and keep you on that schedule, I think can be really helpful, especially in off season. Like, I really never prescribe to my athletes like more than 2 weeks off, because, you will after 2 weeks, you will lose some fitness there. But especially, athletes after hundreds or 100Ks, I mean, you're 10 to 14 days of rest for very specific reasons. You've just done something extremely hard and you really, really, really need to rest. It's not beneficial to go out and start running or cycling or doing things too soon. That's when some athletes start to get stir crazy, right? So I think sinking into back into your routine, maybe in the second week, because it's good to have other hobbies and things, but we all know like we love running. And so it's hard to fill that void.
Yeah. I like hiking with both because like I'm never gonna go just like hike for fun by myself. Like that is torture to me. But it's kind of fun to do with like the dog, like take time for stuff and not think about trying to like fill in gaps, but really embracing that emptiness because that's where really good stuff happens. Like not trying to like, go out and like do like an aggressive hike, but to like just really like be outside with Bowie and let like relaxation occur.
Yeah. Getting out, connecting with nature.
I remember
Sarah?
my 100, Zoe said like, I took an extra rest day or something. I was like feeling off and she was like, this is fine because remember the purpose of this point in your training is rest. And like having that why, we have the whys behind the workouts and like the why behind the rest, people want to run, but actually like the thing that's going to benefit you right now is resting and taking care of your body. And that helped me every day be like, no, I'm like resting today. And that's training. Like that is like part of the big picture here.
Yeah, exactly. So like if you come back too soon or, like if like, especially like Sarah coming off her first 100, like everyone, that process looks different for everyone. And like, particularly off your first 100, like some people are like, oh, I'm totally ready to get back at it. I think more often than not, like the first time you do like a really big distance, your body's like, what the actual hell? That was horrific. I'm in crisis, And so like the worst thing you can do is try to talk your body into doing something it's not ready to do. Like that will not help you gain fitness. That will just increase your risk of, either physical injury or burnout down the line. Like if you're feeling like not that motivated after a race, like that's okay. That's your brain saying like, I'm kind of like putting up some safety guards so we don't like go too ham right after the gate after we just did like a 30-hour ultra. And I think that, those are important things to listen to, particularly after a big event. I mean, it could even be like, your first marathon, like that's super hard on the body, your first half marathon, like being able to just sit with whatever complex feelings come up after putting yourself out there. I think if you feel like apathetic walking away from an event, that could be troubling. I think just like expect to feel things and don't judge whatever comes up. Like it's always good if it's not pleasant, but it's like healthy and normal to feel a little raw, a little vulnerable, a little bit adrift, and talking about those things with people will be very helpful to you.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. I think there's a couple comments here in the chat box because obviously I think this everybody can relate to this question. Question of is an easy hike that different than an easy bike ride? Probably not. My biggest thing for athletes who are like taking time off of 100, like after any big race, is how are you contextualizing the hike and the bike ride? If there is any sort of thought about like, this will help me stay aerobically active, this will allow me to like do X, Y, and Z training thing, then like there's a problem with you going out and hiking, or there's an issue. I'm going to have an issue with you going out and biking. When you're resting, when you're in a period of rest, and it doesn't say cross train on your schedule, an easy bike ride, maybe 40 minutes or something around town. An easy hike, I think of easy hikes as like that's a walk.
It's a walk. Like
it's no resistance on the legs.
Do not do exercise.
Yeah,
like
no
for
training.
me, a hike is like I am outside with my dog, but like at no point am I gaining or even maintaining fitness.
Or
I'm
thinking
like
about it.
One step above Netflix is like
right.
Netflix, but with like vitamin D.
It's like a way to mix things up so you're not on the couch.
Yeah.
It's, I don't think about it as like, this is helping me actively recover. This is me like getting circulation going to my legs so like I can be less sore and start running sooner. I try to remove all thoughts that relate back to training. And really just try to get down to the basics, like after a big race, a little
because
hike.
it is pleasant, not because of like any other training related thing.
So you have to ask yourself that if you're, going out there and wanting to get on the bike and you're putting some time in and you're like, okay, this is starting to feel a little challenging, or there's resistance on my legs, you really need to think about dialing that back. because that's not rest. It's the same reason why we wouldn't want you to go and do a bike workout on a Monday rest day. There's just a comment from Caitlin about good feedback and everything. So awesome. Glad that's resonating with you. Cool. Thank you guys. I feel like this is a really great question, and we are kind of we're like almost a month away from time change, which for me always elicits some kind of like feelings of grogginess every day. And like my system feels
Spring's the
off
one
and I
that
feel down.
kills me.
Spring is the one that lifts me up. Fall is the one that like crushes me. So now I've got that to look forward to. So this is a really, really relevant question. And I know you guys have been reading the Rad Weekend updates and how many athletes have been racing the last like month, and how many of those events have just, they just require so much of each athlete, and the entire training process kind of culminating. And it can be really tough to kind of feel normal after that. It can take time. And I remember my first 50 miler, it took me like a month to feel normal after that. Like it was such an effort for me to get it done. And now like, that was a long time ago, but every race feels a little bit better. Like I tend to bounce back a little bit quicker. And I think part of that is just trying to like not judge yourself for feeling weird, and just, not yourself. And Sarah, really mentioned like preparing to feel off, and maybe if maybe expecting to feel a little bit off, and having some kind of like preemptively, having a few things that you're going to like sink into in response to that, not react to it, but respond to it, could be really helpful.
Yeah. Ooh, we're tired today.
Yeah. It's been
Just
long.
thinking about that time
week.
change.
Yeah. Oh God. Don't do it. If they could just get away.
Abolish
daylight
daylight
I'd
savings.
be stoked. All right. So we're really crushing it
We
today.
could probably answer that one super quick.
You like this one?
Drop it. Yeah.
What
I mean,
about
we have
this
5
one?
minutes. I'm not going to answer that in 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. I figured you'd have a quick one for that.
Okay, I do.
I really want to know. your
Okay,
answer to that
great.
one. There's a lot of articles on Trail Runner Magazine that outline different approaches for training, or different areas where athletes can excel based on whether they are fast twitch or slow twitch athletes. Is there a way to tell which one you are without getting a muscle biopsy? Are you able to tell through our performance in log posts if an athlete has more fast twitch or slow twitch tendencies? Does your training approach differ based on fast or slow twitch?
So technically, no, there is no actual way to tell without getting a biopsy, like explicit, that's the only way to be sure. However, if an athlete starts to slow down as you increase, typically most slow twitch athletes, as you increase volume, their efficiency will increase. However, with athletes who tend to be very fast twitch, which honestly we do not see a lot of, they will slow down with higher volume training. So essentially the only way to really tell from a coach's perspective is to work with someone over the course of honestly probably about a year and see how they respond to different training methodologies. For most athletes, the general course is to gradually increase volume with time, right? Like we're generally trying to build most people's volume, because like for athlete, we're not prescribing 120-mile weeks for anyone, but it is like, that is the best way to provoke adaptations in running, is to increase volume, because there's a much more hard limit on how much intensity a human can do. Like you can't just do 30 miles a week forever and then only increase intensity. However, for fast twitch athletes, they'll start to stagnate or regress with higher volume training. So if I see that in an athlete, I'll like throw a 6-week, I'll reduce volume and then do shorter bursts of speed focused intensity. I will also say that this is very rare, and for the level that most people, like my folks like myself included, are competing at, we're not trying to qualify for the Olympic marathon. and most people, we don't quite get to that. Like for a lot of my athletes, I haven't quite gotten to the point where it becomes clear that they're doing too much volume to continually provoke adaptations.
Yeah, that's a pretty rare situation. I
Yeah.
feel like,
especially if you like, it's also a lot of it is self-selection, right? Like if you are really great, if most people I think are like, if we gave everyone on our team a muscle biopsy, it's going to be, I would probably say like 90% plus predominantly slow twitch, because y'all have self-selected into distance and endurance running. If we tested 100 people, half of whom were microcosm athletes, the other half of whom were Olympic sprinters, like, yes, that's going to look different. Or like, I don't even like football players, I guess.
they're pretty fast twitch as well.
Yeah. But like, if you've gotten this far in training, like likely genetically, we're going to skew pretty heavily slow twitch. But also that composition the composition's not going to change so much as the recruitment. And a lot of our training hinges on increasing the recruitment of different types of muscle fibers.
Particularly slow twitch, because we do a
Particularly slow
lot more
twitch.
aerobic training than we do, that 80-20 rule. Or really it's, in running, it's probably a lot closer to 90-10.
Yeah.
And that, we're building slow twitch muscle fibers because we're running below aerobic threshold all the time. And it, to me, something that's important is to look at athlete kind of history. What sports were you into when you were younger? Were you running cross country? Were you into endurance sports back then? Because if that's the case, most likely you're going to be predominantly slow twitch. With the caveat that, everybody has some fast twitch muscle fibers. We do build those when we're doing hills and strides and short, intense workouts and things like that, because we need those to be able to go fast. But, the longer you've been involved with endurance sports, that slowly changes. Even a football player who, played college football and now is getting into trail running and is 10 years into the trail running process, or 5 years, they are slowly going to be changing the balance of those fibers based on kind of like the sport that they've been actively pursuing and training in. And I think, overthinking something like this to get a few extra percentages possibly in your training might kind of not be worth it.
Yeah.
In fact, I think like it's better to think about like, am I getting my consistent runs in? How often am I running, the lower end of the volume versus the higher end of the volume? How many runs am I skipping every month because of life happening?
Or like if we're deep in a higher volume training block and you're like, wow, I am definitely like, if I see an athlete that's not getting faster, that's when we'll switch tact. But like, my guy Jason is on the call here. He is a fast twitch athlete, used to play more fast twitch sports, but now he's a badass 100-mile runner. And instead of getting a muscle biopsy, I just remember the first time I saw his splits for strides in the log, I was like, I feel like this is a typo, because like, oh my God, that is so fast. But like, you can have those like really fast, strides. And then like with Jason, we just like slowly, he already came in pretty high volume, which is to say that like you can be a fast twitch athlete and adapt to high volume training and then do well. Like he just crushed the grindstone 100, probably wasn't using a lot of fast twitch muscles out there, other than a finish line sprint. But this is really only relevant if you are a fast twitch athlete and you don't respond to high volume training, which I have never personally seen in coaching, and predominantly is discussed in the context of like hypothetical studies, like on very elite athletes.
I haven't had
like you came from a fast twitch background, but now you run 50s.
Yeah, and I think the difference is that yes, and my strides are, I think, objectively very fast. But the difference is that I've been engaged in endurance sports since 2011.
Yeah.
So that's 10 years. So
so whatever,
time,
again, like if you got a muscle biopsy, that information wouldn't even really be that relevant because you're adapting to the training stimulus. sufficiently.
Correct. And I think like, if I was to, have just gotten off the tennis court yesterday and started to pursue trail running today, that may, that would dictate a lot of what I'd be capable of doing training wise. Like my strides would be, at 3:20 pace or whatever. They'd be insanely fast.
But then like
But
you
my
get to the end of
ability
an
to
8-mile run. and
right.
you're
But
like,
my
"Oh,
ability to run like anything more than a mile, like my mile time was really fast in college. Now
That
it's
second
probably
mile.
really, really slow, comparatively. And that's because, like we're training for longer events. We're not training, we're not training at VO2 max all the time.
No, we are not.
Cool. I hope that helped. Don't get wrapped
Don't
up
worry
in
about
those
it.
little things. Stay consistent. You guys are all crushing it. Yeah, we are going to answer a few more questions on Monday, but we will not be doing calls next weekend. We're out of town. Hope you all have a great weekend. Fall is here. Adventure and have fun because the snow's coming. Bye.
Oh no.